Do you like DACA? Spiky cylinders of death? Weapons that are equally large and impractical? Do you enjoy ignoring the Gregorian calendar? Yes? Well, then you've come to the right place. It is the year of our Ork, October the 69th, and today we're going to paint the model that almost made me go insane, and all of its 2,000 rivets. This big old Ork Stompa. Alright, let's do this. It all starts with some primer, Zenithal style this time around, black all over and white from the top to pop out those details and give us an underpainting to work from. Now when we pull out some transparent paint and load it into the airbrush, the underpainting will show through. Citadel contrast paint is perfect for this kind of painting. The shadows turn a nice deep red, while the bright bits retain their luminosity. Why red? Because the red ones go faster according to Ork beliefs. That's real lore, by the way. See, it says it right here. So instead of stomping around with the lumbering finesse of a Snorlax and a Tutu, the Stompa will be rolling into the battle hot and quick. Just as quick as this little Shelob brought up my heart rate.
Ooh, oh, I don't like that.
Even Henry Cavill's Golden Custodians won't stand a chance. And you know what else is real lore? The more orcs that believe something, the more real it becomes. And you know what that means? If you are all my orc brothers and sisters, and we all believe deep enough in our little orc hearts, and go down and hit that like button, Henry Cavill might see this video and fight me. I mean, not in real life, he'd completely whoop my ass. I mean on the tabletop, Henry. Come on. Orcs on Custodes action. Let's do this. Now the one downside of using transparent paints over a Zenithal Prime is some of the highlights end up being a bit washed out and anemic, just like me after a day at the sauna. These reds are looking a little too pink for my taste, so I brought out some bright Pyro Red from Pro Acryl to reinforce the highlights and up the saturation. Using the airbrush for this step, I was able to do some panel modulation as well. The trick to do this is to use the airbrush at an angle so the highlights butt up to dark recesses. Sometimes the edges are a bit too close together though, so you're going to need something to mask off different areas. I use old worthless playing cards like this. Gotcha, I'm not a monster. You'll notice I'm not hitting some of the panels with red here, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Actually, I'll touch on that now. One of the things that Zenithal Prime isn't going to help us with is with metallics. For those, you're going to want a nice dark base coat. Typically, I'd use black, but this time around I used almost black, dark green from Vallejo. Most of this will end up getting covered by layers of shiny paint, but what does show through is going to contrast and complement the red nicely. Kind of like eating a piece of turkey that got a little bit of that cranberry juice on it. Mmm, delicious. If you accidentally get any green onto the red here, it's not a big deal at all. In fact, that's free weathering. To apply the metals, I loaded up a tiny makeup brush with metallic paint, and then scrubbed most of the paint off on this black construction paper I used to protect the gorgeous cherry wood desk below. This is a little trick that I picked up from a recent Miniac video. Using a paper towel instead will sap and purify the medium in the paint. Instead, using actual paper leaves those precious bodily juices which help when applying the paint and keeps things from looking all dusty. All the metal bits and panels were hit in this fashion, and then hit again with a brighter metal color, where I wanted things to be a bit brighter and a little less darker. Now, switching back to the red, we're going to use some green. I gotta keep you on your toes. I mixed up some translucent green from Pro Acryl with some Vallejo glazing medium. And then used that putrid concoction to reinforce the shadows of all the red panels. I used a wombo combo of glazing and wicking off with water here. Lay down where you want the dark spots with paint, and then use a brush wet with just water to massage and pull the glaze around to your liking. This is a technique used a lot by watercolorists, but let's be real here, you're not going to go watch somebody paint with watercolors, even though you should. I mean, look at that. It's amazing. Just, wow, that's cool stuff. On some portions of the model, I also used the mix to do some panel lighting. but I got an even better technique for that I'll show in a bit. For now, it's time to work on the panels scattered around the Stompa. I wanted all these panels to look a bit different, like the orcs took them off of vehicles they destroyed in combat. So I loaded up my palette with several colors and made Jedi and Sith versions of each. For the paint application, I stole a technique from the one and only ScratchBashing, who, for those of you who don't know, actually invented Orktober. Here's some footage of when he did it. It's one for the history books. The trick to this technique is avoiding hitting the edges of the panels, which gives you some free weathering in the form of shiny, worn-torn edges. To add to this technique, I used the light and dark side versions of the paint to do some wet blended panel modulation and sloppy, not quite edge highlighting. It's totally fine to be sloppy with this technique. Leave some brush strokes, leave some obvious lines. It all contributes to a nice battle-damaged, war-torn look. For the face and a few of the random panels, I base coated with a warm gray and then mixed up a special white to glaze on highlights. This white consists of white and white, but this white was translucent. Wait, no, it was this white. One of these was translucent, I swear. This special white allowed me to build up the highlights slowly and avoid chalkiness, which is kinda hard to do with non-special white paints. Now let's cover a staple in Ork aesthetics, checker patterns. The trick for this is to use a pencil first to lay down exactly where you want the checkers to go. Don't try to freehand this, it never turns out the way you want it to. Just like with the grouchy face, I first used a warm gray for those base coats and then highlighted it up with the white. Alright, back to the metallics. To break up the steely monotony, I hit some random bits here and there with a bronze color to make them look like brass, or maybe copper. I don't know, brass and copper paints always just kind of look the same to me. If someone can explain the difference in colors to me in the comments, I'd appreciate it. Now it's time to get all rusty and crusty. Now this non-free weathering is done by splotching burnt sienna all over the texture paste that I applied when building the model. This base brown went all around town, hitting all the rust to be found. Then to brighten things up, I went back around with Pro Acryl Orange, adding some highlights and dimension back to this crusty rust. This, of course, was a bit too bright though, so I brought out something I've been sleeping on for way too long, oil wash. This is super simple to make. Squeeze out some thick paint logs into a glass container, add in some headache-inducing, not really odor-free mineral spirits, and mix it up. Dabbing the rust crusts with a juicy brush pulls the oil off and the paint flows right where you want it to, deep down into the cracks and crevasses. If you get a little overzealous and apply too much, fear not. Oil has a long drying time, and you can soak it right back up with some paper towel. Now I'm loving the ScratchBashing flavored panels, but I want to give them some classic CC Minis charm. So to add in a little bit more pop, I go around the model adding in shadows to the panels, focusing on where the colors meet the metal below, adding in a shadow as if the paint was peeling off. I used a translucent black for these, because I could. I mixed all the different panel colors with a pale yellow from Pro Acryl. Using these brighter colors, I went around the opposite sides of the shadows, adding in highlights where the paint should be peeling on the other side and catching the light. These two steps play off one another, giving the panels a nice 3D effect. Going back to the red now, I did some edge highlighting with the same bright red from earlier. And then went back in with that red mixed with orange for an even brighter highlight. With the red highlights in place, I brought the oil wash back out and went around doing some panel lining and hitting all the little rivets, giving a shadow where they meet the model. I hit the face and all the different white panels with a very thin black wash, darkening things down just a bit so I could come back with some pure white and add in some final poppy highlights. If you saw the build video, you know that I went a little insane placing all these rivets, and to be honest, I was dreading this part of the paint job. Luckily, my friend James from Rising 8 Minis reached out and recommended I use a metallic paint pen instead of traditionally brushing every single rivet. This certainly made the process quicker and helped me from diving deeper into madness. It's definitely fitting that this advice came from James, as his channel goes over a whole bunch of different mental health topics through the lens of our hobby. It's really interesting stuff. Go check it out. There's a link down below. And with that, the Stompa is done. Thank you so much for watching, and a huge shout out to all my patrons who helped me keep this channel going despite my wildly inconsistent upload schedule. If you haven't seen it, here's a link to the build video. And as always, stay healthy and take care. Bye-bye.